going beyond the headlines.
Now you know with Rob Snow on News Radio.
Welcome to the show. I'm David Smith, sitting in for Rob Snow today. Thank you for joining us. It's been a very busy 24 hours in Canadian political news. Let's get you up to date. We continue to follow the situation with the war in the Middle East. Israel's offensive in Lebanon continues today with another round of airstrikes against the capital city of Beirut. There are thousands of Canadians living in Lebanon right now, caught up in this fresh round of violence in the region. The Trudeau government is now tasked with getting those who want to leave out of the country safely. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly told reporters on Wednesday that more than 600 seats on evacuation flights are available, and she urged Canadians living in Lebanon to evacuate by commercial airlines while they still can.
We have 654 seats available. So you can see that basically there's still lots of seats that are available to Canadians. So my point to those watching or listening to us is if you're offered a seat, please take it. And I know it's difficult. I know it's difficult to leave your loved ones. I understand it's difficult to leave sometimes your home. But please, this is about your own safety and the safety of your loved ones, so please take the seat.
Under the plan, travelers do have to pay for their own airfare. As of Wednesday, Global Affairs Canada has helped 344 Canadian permanent residents and their eligible family members leave Lebanon. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau condemned Iran's recent attack on Israel and again called for de-escalation of the conflict.
We unreservedly condemn Iran's ballistic missile attack against Israel. It is further destabilizing action by this terrorist regime in the region, putting civilians at risk and running the risk of a wider war. Obviously, Israel has the right to defend itself against these attacks. At the same time, we have to try and do everything we can to avoid a wider war, to protect civilians and to get humanitarian aid into affected regions.
Closer to home, Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party's efforts to defeat the Trudeau government and trigger a snap election have stalled after two failed attempts from the Conservatives at passing motions of non-confidence in the government. The spotlight is now on the Bloc Québécois. The Bloc leader, Yves-François Blanchet, has given the Trudeau government a deadline of October 29th to support two pieces of its priority legislation. Otherwise, Blanchet says he will begin meeting with other opposition parties to discuss how to defeat the Liberals later this fall. The two demands that Blanchet has are to protect supply management and agriculture in the next round of free trade negotiations with the United States, and also to expand old age security payments for seniors between age 65 and 74. The Liberals refused to support the Bloc Québécois motion in the House yesterday afternoon. Reporters wanted to know, what will the Bloc do now? Yves-François Blanchet was cagey, but he did have this to say.
Mr. Blanchet, why are you still willing to work with the Liberal government when they voted down this motion? Is that not sending a signal of some sort?
Okay, let's understand things as they are. The government, I will learn that word one day, did not have the spine to provide us and Canadians and Quebecers with a clear answer. So they just want to get some more time and to keep not deciding about anything. They might hope that they will go further than October 29th. They will not. So they have until a few days from now to go on with the royal recommendation. And if they do not, we will start as rapidly as next week to speak with other oppositions in order to get ready to go into an election.
So stay tuned, I guess, is the message from the Bloc Québécois leader, and stay tuned we will. As for the Conservatives, they do not have any more motions of non-confidence coming, at least for this week. In the daily question period in the House of Commons yesterday, Pierre Poilievre sparred with the Prime Minister on the cost of living and also, you guessed it, the carbon tax.
Prime Minister is hiking taxes on home builders, on doctors, on job creators, and on farmers. And he's also raising taxes on hospitals and schools. The New Brunswick Premier is taking this Prime Minister to court because of the unconstitutional quadrupling carbon tax and the costs it will impose on snowplows, ambulances, heating hospitals and schools, meaning the loss of countless police officers, nurses, doctors, and teachers. Instead of defeating the carbon tax in court, why can't we have a carbon tax election so Canadians can axe the tax?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, for the past number of years, multiple Conservative premiers have gone after the price on pollution in courts, and they lost at the Supreme Court. The Canadians have decided that price on pollution is the right thing. We've won multiple elections on that because Canadians know that the only way to build a strong economy is to fight climate change at the same time. The Leader of the Opposition doesn't get that, doesn't accept that, doesn't understand that abandoning the fight against climate change would hurt Canadians, would hurt our institutions, would hurt people and economic growth right across the country.
So some well-worn lines, obviously, from both of those party leaders there. But I do think it's interesting that the Prime Minister continues to insist that Canadians like the carbon tax. He says Canadians know the carbon tax is a good thing. I'm not sure what polls he's reading these days. They must be special Liberal polls that I don't have access to. One more story to highlight for you today. It has to do with immigration and the government of Quebec. Premier François Legault says the federal government should force asylum seekers arriving in Quebec to move to other provinces, including people who have already settled in his province. He's been arguing that it doesn't make sense that Quebec receives about 45% of would-be refugees in Canada, despite only having 22% of the population. Legault told reporters on Wednesday that he wants half of the asylum seekers currently in Quebec to be transferred elsewhere in the country. And that's the federal government's job, according to the Premier. Federal Immigration Minister Mark Miller had this to say about the Quebec Premier's comments.
What do you think's going on? Why do you think Mr. Legault is even floating these kinds of ideas?
Well, I think I, like anyone, can speculate about his state of mind. I can only speak about what is put to me.
Is it politics that's driving this?
I think there's a lot of politics that's driving this. I think this is a rhetoric that I think he can weaponize for his own political purposes. I think at the end of the day, we have to stay in the reasonable and the practical. Asking to reduce the number of asylum seekers in Quebec by 50% is essentially saying get rid of these people for me, without looking at the work that's been done by our groups, and we'd have to go to people's doors and knock on them and ask them to leave. There's things that have to make sense. We've been asked to reduce the number of asylum seekers in Quebec. They are taking on their disproportionate portion. We've done some work at Trudeau Airport in the last 3 months. It's showing some initial results, but it's nothing that's going to be fixed overnight.
That's a no, I think. I believe the federal immigration minister is saying no, the Trudeau government won't be knocking on people's doors and flying tens of thousands of refugees out of Quebec and into other provinces. But the back and forth between François Legault and the feds on immigration shows no signs of cooling down anytime soon. As I said, it's been a busy 24 hours in Canadian politics, and we're just getting started. I'm David Smith. This is Now You Know on News Radio.
No question goes unasked or unanswered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow returns on News Radio.
David Smith here in for Rob today. Thank you for joining us. Joining me now on the line, we have our regular contributor, Michael Taube, syndicated columnist with Troy Media and Loonie Politics, former speechwriter for Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Hello, Michael. How are you?
I'm good, David. Hope you're doing well today.
I am. Michael is here today to help us get our fix of American politics this week. So, Michael, the vice presidential hopefuls, Tim Walz, J.D. Vance, they had a showdown, a debate on cable television on Tuesday.
Yep.
A lot of the analysis I've seen focused around how quite civil the debate was compared to other recent debates. What were your thoughts? Let's start with who you think won the debate.
Sure, if you want to start off that way. I believe that J.D. Vance won overall. And again, I know some people say, well, what else is new? Toby's a conservative, so naturally he's going to pick the Republican. But I think if you look at it fairly and you look at how they presented themselves, although I agree with you, and we'll talk about the tone of the debate, which was certainly a throwback, I think that J.D. Vance proved to a lot of people that not only could he handle himself well on the stage, which I think many people who followed U.S. politics knew, he was obviously far more experienced and far more confident at the lectern than Tim Walz was. Again, the two men obviously represent different sides of the political aisle, but they're also people who obviously do different things and have different jobs, so to speak, in politics. Whereas J.D. Vance is a senator and Tim Walz is a governor, which means that obviously when you're debating issues and debating people, it's very different because obviously a national and international forum is more associated with the U.S. Senate than it would be for a gubernatorial race. So it's not shocking that way. But in terms of the way the two men handle things, yes, I think that this was an exceptional throwback to debates that we've had in the past where we saw that people were very pleasant with one another. There wasn't a lot of fighting. There wasn't a lot of controversy. And I know that some people suggested that they were lulled to sleep. But regardless, I think that J.D. Vance, the Republican vice presidential candidate, had better control over the issues. He spoke more smoothly. He seemed more confident when he gave his answers. This is not to say that Tim Walz didn't have good moments and scored some points. Of course he did. But I think that if you look at it overall and you look at it with a very fair and level-headed approach, you'll actually see that whatever this quote-unquote monster that the political left likes to make, J.D. Vance out to be, was proven to be not only inaccurate, but you saw on various networks and various cable stations, Fox News, CNN, BBC, MSNBC, and others, it was universally understood, with only maybe a couple of exceptions here and there, that Vance performed better than Walz did.
And on the tone of the debate, Michael, do you think that was a conscious strategy for J.D. Vance and his team? Maybe because President Trump has such a he can be fairly blunt. He can be kind of brutal in those formats, which works to his advantage in many ways. Do you think they were trying to maybe create some contrast there between those two candidates?
Well, to be fair, I mean, it takes two to tango, which means that even if one debater is doing it that way, it doesn't mean the other necessarily has to follow suit. So actually, J.D. Vance and Tim Walz sort of both did the same strategy. But yes, there may have been something behind the scenes. I don't doubt it. I thought of it at the time. I'm sure others did too. And it may have served, as you've kind of alluded to, as a contrast to what we saw in what appears to be the one and only presidential debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, which was very, very different in the way it was handled, the tone and tenor of the debate, the way the candidates handled themselves, etc. So I think that the Republican Party may have suggested that way, but also I think you have to look at the fact, and whatever Canadian listeners and whatever people who listen to this radio station know about J.D. Vance, he is a very different politician and person than Donald Trump is. Now, you can argue that anybody is, but at the same time, there obviously are some people in politics who, if not necessarily devotees of Donald Trump or followers of Donald Trump or model themselves after Donald Trump, they may use some of the language, some of the ideas and concepts and try to build an image which is similar or kind of like the way Donald Trump is, not only when in terms of his speaking style, but just the way he handles himself day to day on the campaign hustings. J.D. Vance, though, I certainly think realized that he had to create probably a different environment when he spoke. But at the same time, if he didn't have a dance partner who was, so to speak, who was willing to do it, like Democratic vice presidential candidate Tim Walz, he could have tried, but it wouldn't have mattered in the end. But ultimately what we found out is that Vance and Walz, well, obviously having very different political ideologies, political ideas, philosophies, etc., in terms of their mannerisms or in terms of the way that they handle the debate stage, you saw a very similar approach and a very conciliatory approach, which, even if you find it dull in this day and age, it's nice to have that sort of a throwback. It's the way politics used to be, and it's the way debates used to be, and it was nice to see, even if it was only for one night.
Yeah. A couple minutes left with you here, Michael. More broadly on the election race in the United States, many of the polls, most of the polls that I've seen, all are more or less within the margin of error. Very close. Very, very close. You observe things down there very closely yourself, Michael. What is your sense of it? Do you give the edge to Trump or Harris at this point?
Well, I mean, the margin of error refers more to the popular vote. And again, this is a mistake that is often made or it's conveniently ignored. The popular vote doesn't necessarily translate into success in the Electoral College. Now, yes, the two things can be aligned, and often they are aligned, but we've seen in our lifetimes a few examples where it hasn't happened. The 2000 presidential election between George W. Bush and Al Gore was a classic example of that. And Donald Trump's victory in 2016 over Hillary Clinton was another recent example of that. But I would agree that this is an extremely close race. In terms of margin of error, I think that's probably accurate. It's been that way for a while. Kamala Harris obviously built up a lot of the support that Joe Biden, who is the sitting president, would have been the presidential candidate this year if he had not decided to step aside or was pushed away, whichever you want to believe the scenario was. But she's rebuilt a lot of it basically by not capturing new American votes, by rebuilding the progressive base in the United States. I think it is going to be close. But if you look at models for the Electoral College, as of right now, Donald Trump would win an extremely close election. I don't think there's much question of that in my mind. You can use anybody you want. You can use Rasmussen. You can use Nate Silver. You can use all these different models. Real Clear Politics. They all sort of show that. And my sense is right now, Donald Trump would win the election based on the Electoral College, but it wouldn't shock me if he lost the popular vote to Harris because he's never won the popular vote in any presidential election where he's been at the top of the ticket.
Okay.
So right now, Trump with a small advantage.
Okay. That's our time, Michael. Excellent analysis as always. Really appreciate your time today for joining us here.
Thank you, my friend. Take care. Have a nice week.
Thank you. That's Michael Taube, syndicated columnist, former speechwriter for Prime Minister Stephen Harper. I am David Smith, in for Rob Snow today. Thank you for joining us. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after this on News Radio.
Now you know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio. The Newsday Panel.
Yes, it is. David Smith here in for Rob Snow today. This is the Newsday Panel on another busy news day. Joining me on the line now, we have Kate Harrison, Vice Chair, Summa Strategies. Hello, Kate. Do we have Kate?
Hello, David.
Hello, I can hear you now. And Ashton Arsenault, partner, Crestview Strategy. Hi, Ashton, how are you?
Hey, David.
So, we're a couple weeks now into this fall sitting of Parliament. It's already kind of bizarre and nasty, personal nasty attacks. But for now, it looks like the Liberals will survive until at least Christmas. That's my sense of it. So, Kate, starting with you, what do you think the main parties are looking to achieve broadly in this fall session?
Well, the goals are a little bit different depending on who we're talking about. From the Conservative side, they want an election as fast as possible. They don't want to allow any more opportunity to the degree it exists for people's attitudes to change or shift, the economy, to maybe net improve. We'll see what happens south of the border, but the polling is very clear that going to the polls now would be a good thing for the Conservatives. So they're going to use whatever they can, whatever tools available to try and bring that about. For the Bloc, and I think we'll spend a fair bit of time on them today, but I think really the key is extraction. They're looking at a scenario where, the polling's not bad for them. If they were to go to an election, they might even form the official opposition. But they could find themselves with not a lot of room to negotiate under a Conservative majority government. So For now, this is all about the politics of trying to get the Bloc caucus to agree that maybe now is the time to go to the polls. And I think that some of those internal dynamics are why we see the promises around OAS and supply management shaking out as they are. So getting what they can now from this government, or at least providing a nice platform to go to an election on. For the NDP, I think this is what it's always been, which is Jagmeet Singh's personal survivability. There is a modest bump in terms of breaking up with the SACA and ending that agreement, but not enough that would result in a major change for the NDP politically. So I think that his desire to hold on as long as possible, because I don't know that we see another federal election with Jagmeet Singh at the helm, is what is going to drive a lot of the NDP decision-making on whether or not now's the time to go to an election. And I think many on that side would say now is not the time.
And as for the Liberals, Kate, just survive?
Oh, God, hold on for all as much time as they possibly can. I mean, I think that they are very keen to have a boogeyman in Donald Trump, should he actually be elected, to try and draw some contrast. But the main thing for them is trying to not have caucus and cabinet indicate that they're not seeking re-election. So, again, a lot more internal focus on the future of that party and trying to grin and bear it electorally.
Okay, Ashton, the 3 or 4 main parties, what do you think the big goals are for this fall session?
Yeah, I think Kate did a good job at laying it out, but, let's call a spade a spade. Either way you slice it, successive non-confidence motions are damaging to a government. Governments that are well-liked and otherwise perform well don't face routine confidence motions. It's just the reality. And so you wonder where their win's going to come from at this point. It's really tough to come up with much. I guess we'll see what the fall economic statement has in store. For the opposition parties, not all of them are created equally, right? So you've essentially got the Bloc holding the government hostage over 2 policies I deem to be outlandish. You've got the NDP who's sort of meandering through life without 2 nickels to rub together in order to fight a campaign with, which is a whole other issue entirely. And then you've got the presumptive government in waiting who appears to be growing stronger with each passing day. And so, the longer this takes, the worse the government looks, and I think everybody's really looking for that inflection point. But, you want to pick today's loser? It's the NDP.
What is it about old age security? Supply management, I understand, for Quebec, for the Bloc. But what is it about old age security, Ashton? Can you give me some insight on that? Why is that so important to Mr. Blanchet?
Well, you look at some of the demographics in Quebec, it's generally trending older, and obviously it is a very, very large entitlement program. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the price tag for doing this is about $15 billion. This is not chump change. And so, I think Kate used the word extraction. I think it's a good word. How much can the Bloc get out of this government before the government's time is up? I guess we'll wait and see. I think we're all tuning into October 29th to see whether or not the Bloc is going to live up to its word, because the last time I checked, the government wasn't a fan of that idea as per yesterday when they voted against it. So I guess it all remains to be seen.
Yeah, it's $16 billion.
16, there you go.
Over 5 years. Kate, anything to add on that? We have a minute before we stop here.
It not only is it expensive, but I would say the Liberals don't have a problem spending money historically, including if it means keeping them in power longer. I think it's less about the price tag for them than it is about the minimal political benefit that they would receive. They talk a lot about fairness for every generation, but the reality is that their voter coalition skews younger. So the opposite of the demographic Ashton rightly mentions is leaning more towards the Bloc, especially in Quebec. So very difficult for them to make a $16 billion promise for seniors who aren't particularly inclined at the moment to vote Liberal, at least in that province, compared to the Bloc Québécois, and leave their bigger coalition in millennials and Gen Z voters left wanting more. So politically, it really doesn't make sense for the Liberals to pursue this at this time.
Yeah, that's such a great point on intergenerational fairness. And God, I hate that term. But a very well-respected economist from Alberta, Trevor Toome, wrote a piece this morning. He crunched the numbers. He figures increasing those OAS payments would cost working Canadians $200 to $400 each a year. So you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. All right, great. Excellent analysis there. We have to stop for a short break. When we come back, we'll keep talking about money. Ashton alluded to it. One of the major federal parties has a lot of money to run an election campaign, and the other two don't. Anybody want to guess who? We'll get into that when we come back. I'm David Smith. This is the Newsday panel. This is Now You Know on News Radio.
Now You Know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
David Smith here in for Rob today. This is the Newsday panel. Kate Harrison with us from Summa Strategies, Ashton Arsenault from Crestview. How hard is it to fundraise when your party is unpopular? In their most recent financial disclosures, the Conservatives had $16 million cash on hand. The Liberals had $2.8 million, and the NDP had just $289,000. Ashton, how much are these numbers influencing the timing of the next election, would you say? And how do Mr. Singh, Mr. Trudeau, and their respective war rooms figure out how to raise some more money?
It is impacting things a lot. It is a hard reality in life that people want to back a winner. We're seeing that play out in real time through these donation numbers. Obviously, huge discrepancies there. And, when your time is up and you're in the process of overstaying your welcome, you'll need to forgive Canadians for not opening up their checkbooks. And that's where we are. And, I think it's important to note that the Tories have a pretty slick fundraising strategy that's really great at picking up, very small donations all the way up to the max, right? And so they've really honed in on that over a successive number of years, and obviously people are looking at them as the government in waiting and the government that is probably going to present the change that Canadians want. The NDP's message is incoherent at the moment. They hate the government, but support them when it matters. And you'll also have to forgive Canadians for not opening up their checkbooks for that nonsense. If I were the NDP, I would probably be calling the best bankers around the country, because when the next campaign comes around, they'll need to get creative.
I have heard that you can pretty much fund a central campaign with loans from the bank, but it does make a difference when you get down to the individual riding level. Is that accurate?
It's accurate, and it's also less than ideal. I mean, you go back a couple of campaigns, the NDP went deep into debt, and it took them a long time to climb out of that debt. It's just sort of a debt-fulfilling prophecy, and it's not where you want to be, and there are some structural challenges that we could get into as to why this is the case, but popularity is not helping them at the moment.
Right. Kate Harrison, what are your thoughts on those fundraising numbers?
Yeah, well, there's also only so much money to go around generally right now. People are generally donating less to any parties as they face kind of economic pressures at home. So, yes, the Conservatives are well-financed. Some other parties are not. But I would say, we should be mindful of the fact that the circumstances right now are such that donations to political parties and to charities are way, way down. This also plays out in terms of kind of organizational capacity. It's not just your ability to run advertisements or the popularity of given leaders, but we've got 3 provincial elections on right now. In the NDP's case, 2 of which are consequential to them, in BC, where they're looking to hold government, and in Saskatchewan, where they're trying to eat into the Saskatchewan party's seat count. A lot of the NDP supporters that are out there might be tapped for some of those campaigns already, both in terms of boots on the ground support as well as financial support. So general economic pressures plus an inability, as Ashton rightly points out, for the NDP to find themselves contrasting with the current government is leaving them financially strapped.
And would you agree that the money situation for the NDP and the Liberals is influencing how they are strategizing around the timing of the next election?
My personal view, I'm not sure how much Jagmeet Singh actually really cares or thinks about the future of the NDP all that much beyond his own personal fortunes. And I think that's why we saw the supply and confidence agreement go on as long as it did. I think what's driving him is less about the financial capability of the party to run a successful campaign, and it's more about things like his pension, which come up in February of next year. And I think that he well knows that barring a breakthrough for the NDP, which at this stage seems very unlikely, this is probably going to be his last kick at the can as federal NDP leader. So again, I think this is more about survivability than it is necessarily the financial situation, though certainly it's a bleak picture on the finance side as well.
Yeah, I agree. The finances aren't going to be that much better in 6 months' time, right? Like, they're not going to add a magical $5 million to their coffers. So Kate's absolutely correct. This is a self-serving endeavor.
And do you think, Ashton, this will be the last election we see Mr. Singh leading this federal NDP party?
Yeah, I've been calling it for a while. I mean, if you're the party brass or even the grassroots members, use whatever ad hominem that you want, the guy's not getting it done. The popularity base is certainly not growing. And, it's hard to determine at this point in time, plus or minus how many seats he needs to come back with after the next election to be even remotely viable. But I think his days are numbered, and I think it's probably time for him to pack up his bag.
Okay, we're going to stop here for a short break, and when we come back, I do want to get into this quote-unquote interview that Mr. Trudeau did on a podcast hosted by one of his own Liberal MPs. Yeah, we're going to get into that when we come back. I'm David Smith. This is the Newsday panel. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to News Radio.
There is no question Rob won't get answered.
Now you know with Rob Snow continues
on News Radio.
David Smith here in for Rob Snow. Today we're winding up our Newsday panel before the top of the hour. I'm here with Kate Harrison and Ashton Arsenault. So, guys, the Prime Minister is in the news this morning for an interview that he did. There's a Liberal MP from the GTA by the name of Nate Erskine-Smith. He has a podcast, kind of a side hobby for him in addition to his work as a member of Parliament. He had Prime Minister Trudeau as a guest on his podcast for an hour-long interview with the Prime Minister on a podcast hosted by one of his own MPs. I don't know. Kate, what is your reaction to that? I find it kind of weird.
Tell me your caucus is falling apart without telling me your caucus is falling apart. It's an odd media and communication strategy to offer this up with your own colleague. I think particularly when you consider Erskine-Smith, not somebody that I would say is really in the Trudeau Liberal fold, often was at odds with his colleagues on a number of things. He took time away to try and seek the Liberal Party leadership in Ontario, and he's known to be a little bit of a maverick, an outside voice, and perhaps an independent thinker. So I think that maybe this is the first time the Prime Minister might have spoken with Erskine-Smith in a couple of years, given how frosty it sounds like that relationship was. I just find myself wondering what value it provides to Canadian voters, even those that are still on the side of the Liberals or accessible to voting for the Liberals. The Colbert interview, though I think it is a bit silly, makes more sense to me strategically than actually sitting down with your own caucus mate. Yeah. So I just find it a bit puzzling from a communications perspective, unless indeed things are quite dire around the Liberal caucus benches.
Ashton, I mean, to Kate's point, like the optics of it, even within the Liberal caucus, like you've got a Prime Minister here who is fighting for his life, for his political survival, and he takes an hour out of his day to go on Nate's podcast. What do you think about that?
Yeah, at the risk of repeating Kate, because she's 100% correct, as she often is, I'm going to dial up the temperature a little bit. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. I am old enough to remember when Nate Erskine-Smith couldn't get an elevator held for him at PMO. And now, apparently, he has the Prime Minister for an hour, so apparently there is an afterlife for failed Ontario Liberal Party candidates. Anyway, long story short, the ship is bursting at the seams here, and it seems to lack any sort of discipline and is otherwise an incoherent strategy. But look, if the brass at PMO believes that the best way to woo Canadians is to appear on a podcast for a disaffected member of your caucus for an hour, so be it. Roll the dice.
I can't make heads or tails of it. I mean, does it not just reek of desperation, Kate, to get this guy on a platform where he won't be challenged at all?
Yeah, well, and it's funny. I actually thought that Erskine Smith was probably more likely to challenge him than Stephen Colbert, given the softballs that went across in that interview. Yeah. And, to Ashton's point, this is not somebody that is really in the Liberal inner circle. So it is an odd use of his time, but look at what happened yesterday on that block vote, on OAS. You had 5 Liberal members of Parliament, Liberals, that broke ranks with the party to vote in favor of that motion. There are rumors swirling constantly around this town of cabinet ministers on the verge of quitting, just waiting for the right opportunity to announce they won't be seeking re-election. Things are very, very bad for the Liberal Party at the moment. One podcast is not going to fix that, but I think it is a good symbol of how much Trudeau is trying to tape all of these pieces together.
Okay, look, I know you guys are keen to get back to listening to the Uncommons podcast with the Prime Minister and Nate Erskine Smith, so I will let you go for today. Thank you so much for your time, both of you.
Thanks both. Take care.
That is Ashton Arsenault, partner Crestview Strategies, Kate Harrison, vice chair with Summa Strategies. I am David Smith, in for Rob Snow on News Radio today. Coming up after the top of the hour, it's Talk Back. Phone lines are open, 1-833-668-2577. I want to talk to you about some wedge issues I think might come up in the next federal election campaign, and see what you think about the Pharmacare program and the Liberals' gun control program. Yeah, it's been a while since we talked about that one. All of that still ahead on News Radio.
It's time to talk back
on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
and have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Yes, 1-833-668-2577. Phone lines are open now. We're ready to go. Call now to get on the air and have your say. This is Talk Back on News Radio. I'm David Smith, in for Rob Snow again today. Thank you for joining us. I want to start off today kind of picking up where we left off on the show yesterday. We had a great discussion yesterday about the election, the looming specter of an early federal election sometime before October of next year. I heard from most people yesterday who said they would be fine with having an early election for a variety of reasons. Most of you said you thought it would be good for the country, time for a change. And we also talked about some of those laws and programs that the Trudeau Liberals are trying their best to get past the House of Commons before they lose power. I want to pick up on that today. I've been thinking a lot about what the next federal election campaign is going to look like. And I think it's going to be a bit nasty, to be honest with you, possibly worse than 2021. The Prime Minister, for all of his faults, he really does excel at campaigning. He's a good politician, for whatever that's worth. And the Liberals have a long track record of using wedge issues very effectively during national campaigns. You know, the hidden agenda, the Conservatives' hidden agenda to make Canadian lives miserable. That's what they're going to say. You mark my words, that's what they'll say. So I want to get your take today on some of those wedge issues. At 1-833-668-2577, I have two for you to consider. Two of them. Two Liberal government programs that aren't yet complete, and two programs the Liberals will try to convince you are vital for the good of all Canadians. Two programs the Conservatives are going to cut to your detriment. The two programs are Pharmacare and gun control. Pharmacare and gun control, two guaranteed wedge issues for the next national campaign, if you want my opinion. So a pretty simple question for you today. I just want to know where those two things would land on your list of priorities for the federal government right now. Election, ballot box issues. The Liberals have two key government programs on the books that they have yet to fully implement. The federal pharmacare program to cover diabetes medication and contraceptives, and the federal gun buyback program to take 1,500 models of what they call military-style guns out of circulation in Canada. Did you forget about the gun buyback program? I wouldn't blame you if you did. They announced it in 2020. It's 2024. They still haven't bought back a single gun. But you can bet your bottom dollar as soon as the Liberals hit the campaign trail, they're going to tell you gun control is a priority for them and it's a priority for Canadians, and the Conservatives want to cut it. But is it, though? Is it really a priority? Did you know that the Liberals haven't actually taken any of those guns out of circulation? They promised they would 4 years ago. And they haven't. Did you even notice? Did you even notice? Is that gun control program, the buyback program, really a priority for you? 1-833-668-2577 on gun control. Give me your thoughts on that one. And as for pharmacare, well, if you've been listening to the news at all these last couple of months, you don't need me to tell you about pharmacare. The Liberals act like this pharmacare program is the second coming of Tommy Douglas himself. But is it, though? Is it really? I'm not really hot on this pharmacare plan. If it didn't end up passing before the Trudeau government was defeated, I don't think I'd lose any sleep. To be honest. I'm just being honest. I think it's too expensive. I think it's badly designed. And I think it's going to mess up a lot of people's existing drug coverage. Because it's single payer. The NDP's demand was that it's a single payer program, which means the government covers all of the cost. No partnering with existing insurance providers to split the bill. Single payer, totally separate from existing insurance plans. Brand new, separate, parallel government insurance. As I said yesterday, pharmacare is why the NDP are still propping up the Liberals in Parliament, if you want my opinion. Again, for me, I'm not losing sleep over the pharmacare bill. They keep calling it National Pharmacare. National Pharmacare. But is it really, though? It's not National Pharmacare. It still has to be administered in partnership with your provincial government. Oh yeah, jurisdiction, provinces, responsible for administering healthcare. What a pain that is. It's going to cover two things. It's got a formulary of two. Contraceptives and diabetes medication. Not much of a pharmacare plan. Not very comprehensive. On top of that, the federal pharmacare plan is likely to impact everyone else's drug coverage. Don't know that for sure. But it's likely, because it's going to be quote-unquote universal, which means the government will commit to paying for it for anyone who needs it. So ask yourself this. Ask yourself this. If you're a private insurance company and the government is offering to pay for something that you're already paying for, why would you continue to cover it? If you have coverage for diabetes medication through your employer drug plan, and next year your insurance company says, yeah, actually, we're not going to cover that anymore, go get on the government insurance plan instead. Isn't that going to negatively impact your life? Is it not possible to cover medication for people who don't have insurance without impacting the people who already do? Not according to the NDP, not according to the Liberals. And they're determined to make it so, even if it means propping up the Liberals for another year. And they're going to paint Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives as heartless enemies of public services. They're going to cut the pharmacare. But is a bad government program really better than no government program? Where is the federal pharmacare program on your list of priorities? 1-833-668-2577. I'm David Smith. This is Talk Back on News Radio. Hang on the line. Your phone calls coming up next.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talk Back on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Wedge issues. Wedge issues in the next election. David Smith here, in for Rob Snow today. I want to get your take on some of these big priority platform ideas that the Liberals are going to try to sell in the next election. Two of them for you to consider today: gun control and pharmacare. You can weigh in on either or both. Let's get to the phones. Phone lines are currently full. Virginia is up first from Alberta. Hi there, Virginia.
Good morning. How are you?
I am fine. What's your take for me today?
Well, I'm going to tell you what I think. I think that we don't need the gun control per se as what Trudeau wants to do. I think that our system we have, you go in and do your exam, learn how to operate a gun, handle a gun, take care of it, et cetera, and so on, and you pass all those requirements, and you're not a lawbreaker, and you have a clean record, you should be able to have a gun, and it doesn't matter what kind of a gun. Because guns don't kill people. People kill people.
Sure. And Virginia, you're not opposed to gun control. It just sounds like you think we have fine gun control in Canada. Is that right?
I do. I think you're going to have criminals no matter what you do, and you got desperate people out there. And we already know that Mr. Trudeau has a very good track record of not being what he says he is. And as a Canadian, I think that you can't believe a word that comes out of his mouth.
When I tell you, Virginia, that the Liberal government over 4 years has spent $67 million on a gun buyback program without buying back a single gun, what do you think about
where
that?
Where does the money go?
That's a good question.
Who's got the money?
It's a good question. So no, gun control not really a burning priority for you, Virginia.
No, I think you should have the right to bear arms to a point.
Sure.
If you're not responsible, then you don't get a gun. It doesn't matter if it's a semi-automatic or if it's a handgun or whatever, a high-powered rifle. If you haven't got the facilities to handle that gun, you can't have it. I think other than that, I think it's trampling on people's rights. And as far as the PharmaSave is concerned, I think our PharmaSave. Our insurance plans that we have to cover people at work and everything are just fine the way they are, but there is one problem. There are some people that are self-employed. They don't get coverage for diabetes and stuff like that. And I'm talking about people that are really sick with diabetes. I have a son-in-law that's really sick with diabetes, and he pays over $1,200 a month for insulin and everything out of his own pocket. He has no coverage. That's not right. I feel that Canadians deserve to have universal health care, and that includes people that are sick beyond their control, people that are diabetics. They don't have control of that. But somebody that's out on the street and getting illegal drugs to stop them from overdosing, they shouldn't be getting any coverage.
Okay.
Because they are not sick. And that's where I'm at with this. I don't think an overreach of the government is these things for Canada. This is a democratic, free country. And I'm going to be very blunt. If we're not careful, we're not going to have a democratic, free country.
Okay.
We're on the very fine line of losing our country. And people need to wake up.
You're not the only person to call me and say that.
He does not care. He does not care. Mr. Trudeau does not care about you, me, Joe Blow down the street, or the guy that's starving to death in the park. He does not care.
Okay.
This is all about money, power, and control. And he will lie, do whatever he can to get what he wants. And that's all the more reason why we need to have him out of government.
All right. Virginia, I want to move along to another caller, but have an opinion next time.
Have a good day. Thank you.
An opinion next time. Thank you, Virginia. Let's go to Val, who's called from Nova Scotia today. Val, you're on the air.
Hello today.
Hello. So on gun control and or pharmacare, are those big burning priorities for you? The way that the Liberal government's going about them?
Gun control is very important to me, yeah. I don't want to turn into what the United States has become.
Sure.
I don't want guns going into children's schools and somebody who is a little bit off go in a shopping center and start mowing down people. I don't want them to have those type of guns,
Sure. Val, and I can appreciate that that's important to you, but do you really think it's important to the Liberal government, given that they've spent 4 years and $67 million and not actually taken back a single gun?
Yeah, I don't know why there's no guns been taken back, but
what is the point of that? What is? Ask yourself, what is the point of that other than just so that they can say they're doing it during an election and then never think about it again?
Well, I'm sure it's not that, but I know they had a registry before, but then when Harper came in, he just destroyed everything was built there.
And it cost $2 billion.
It would have been a lot easier if Harper had said, we're not going to build it anymore, but we'll leave what's here and have the guns that are registered and stay in the registry instead of throwing away what had been done then.
So you really think if the Liberals are elected again, they're suddenly going to buy back those guns that they've been saying they'll buy back for 4 years and haven't?
I would certainly hope so, yes.
Okay. All right, Val, thank you for the call.
Are you laughing at me?
I'll thank you for the call, Val. I appreciate it. We agree to disagree on that one. We agree to disagree on that one. No, I don't think they're ever going to buy back those guns. I don't think that they are at all. It was convenient for them at the time to announce that they would. 4 years later, it hasn't happened. They're going to tell you it's a priority for me. I would ask you to ask yourself, why haven't they done it yet? I'm David Smith, just getting started on the talk back today. 1-833-668-2577. Phone lines available. Give me a call. Get on the air. Have your say. Talking about wedge issues, pharmacare, gun control. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talk Back on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Pharmacare and gun control. Pharmacare and gun control. David Smith here in for Rob Snow today. And again, I just want to make my position crystal clear. I am pro-gun control. But like everything else the government does, I'm only for it if it makes sense and if it's working. And my point about the Liberal gun control initiative, the program that they are still trying to get off the ground after 4 years, is that it can't be working because it's not happening. A gun buyback can't work to make Canadians safer if you haven't bought back any guns. It's real simple to me. It's crystal clear that that's not a real government policy. It is an election platform, and they're going to recycle it again. But I just want you to know I am pro-gun control so that there are no misunderstandings. Back to the phones. It's Anne in Ottawa. Hello, Anne. How are you?
Hi there. My goodness, regarding that last caller, I did not realize Harper derangement syndrome was still alive and well.
Oh, it's
after
doing
all
fine.
This time.
It's doing fine, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Now, regarding the gun control that he said that Harper turfed or whatever, isn't it funny how the criminals in Toronto aren't turning their guns over? I mean, because they're illegal weapons, most of them. There are very few gun crimes in this country that are committed by actual legal gun owners, like in the scheme of things. Now, if the federal government worked in concert, say, with border services in the U.S. and the RCMP and did something to try to stem the flow of illegal weapons coming across the river into Toronto, I would be all for that. That might actually do something to stop the gun violence in a place like Toronto. But this thing is nothing short of window dressing. It's ridiculous, and it's just a really expensive, frilly thing to stick in the window to not do anything and say you're doing something, just like you already said. Now, that's all I have to say about that, really. But regarding the drug thing, oh my God. Again, an example of using a sledgehammer to hit a little finishing nail.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. And regarding what that lady said, I agreed with most of what she said, but the people that aren't covered because by drugs because they're self-employed, I am all for giving people coverage that don't have any kind of drug plan. To me, that would have been the more fiscally prudent, conservative, fiscally prudent thing to do, which is, I'm sure, what Pierre Poilievre would propose. Because this is just ridiculous. I mean, I'm like you. I have drug coverage. I'm retired from the federal government, so I do have a drug plan, and I'm on quite a few medications. And I'm concerned that some of them, and I've heard this, are not going to be covered anymore.
Well, it's a possibility. We don't know for sure, but when you go disrupting an entire industry like that, and we're right into the hard break, I have to let you go. But thank you for your call. Good to hear from you. If there is a new government program that's covering drugs already covered by the private sector, why would they continue to cover them? I can't say with certainty it will mess up your drug coverage, but I think logic would tell us there's going to be some kind of impact. Wait till I tell you how much more it's going to cost as well. That's coming up next. This is News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
It's David Smith here in for Rob Snow today. Getting your thoughts on a couple of these big priority policies the Liberals, in my mind, may try to use as wedge issues in the next election. And the two we're discussing today are gun control and pharmacare. And I'm not exactly against gun control or pharmacare, but the way the Liberals are doing it just doesn't make any sense. Just looking for your thoughts on that today. Let's go next to Paul in Cambridge. Hi, Paul.
How are you doing today?
I'm fine. What's your take?
On this whole gun control thing, it's over $67 million, of course. And out of that $67 million, over $11 million went to outside consultants to tell the Liberals how to take back legally owned firearms from people. There's so much of the so-called outsourcing of contracts for consulting and everything else. $11 million went to some sort of a liberal consulting firm in order to determine how to steal firearms from legal, law-abiding citizens. So you take that $67 million, and let's say we spent that on policing. We spent it on, better border control, prosecuting actual criminals that are bringing guns in from the States. Okay? Instead of attacking legal, law-abiding gun owners. And as far as your other caller goes that asked if you were laughing at him, I'm laughing at you because you're foolish.
Okay, easy.
Yeah, it is not
easy now. Let's avoid name calling.
Okay. It is not legal firearms owners that are going up and shooting up the streets in Toronto. These are illegal guns, and so far the Liberals have done absolutely nothing to combat the flow of illegal guns into Canada. But like I say, $11 million to an outside consulting company, another $11 million went to the RCMP, $35 million went to the Public Safety Department, the Ministry of Public Safety, just to hire people to sit there and think up different ways of taking legally owned firearms from law-abiding citizens. Now, that becomes a slippery slope because once the government establishes that they have the right to seize legal, properly purchased, properly owned, properly used equipment of any sort, what comes next? Could it be your two-stroke lawnmower that they're going to say, okay, we're banning that? Well, there's not that many two-stroke lawnmowers, but what about two-stroke snowmobiles? lots of them out there.
Yep.
Once the government has established that they can take away your legally owned property, then everything is up for grabs.
Okay, Paul.
Okay, now, one
Yep.
other thing.
Yes,
as,
yes.
I'm not going to touch on the pharmacare, although it's a farce.
Okay.
But I'm one of those 2 out of 10 Canadians who does not get more back on their carbon rebate than they pay in. And,
Okay.
it's plain and simple. I know the numbers. I know how much I pay each month on my heating fuel for natural gas to heat my house, water heater, and also I have a gas stove. So I know how much it costs, and it's $44 a month in carbon tax.
Yes.
Times 12 months, that's 400 and something, almost $500. As soon as I've driven far enough to put in 250 liters of gasoline into my vehicle, I'm now one of the 2 in 10 that is not getting back more than they are paying.
Okay, heard. I've heard you, Paul. I've heard you. I don't want to get too far into the carbon tax debate, but I've got phone lines. I've got jam phone lines, Paul. I got to run. But
Okay,
thank you. Thank
have a
you.
great day.
Sorry about that, Paul. Didn't mean to cut you off, but we're just trying to keep it moving. But again, to bring it back to the point, when the liberal canvassers come around and they say, we're doing gun control and we're doing pharmacare, and you get more back from the carbon tax rebate than you pay it, are you going to be buying the story that they're trying to sell come election time? 1-833-668-2577. Matt in Alberta is up next. Hi, Matt.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. What's your take on this for me today?
Well, as far as the gun control, it's a giant scam is what it is. None of it makes any sense. By the banning of certain guns and handguns and rifles, they've hurt the competition shooting in Canada, and their whole aspect on what is banned is totally out to lunch on certain rifles and shotguns and whatnot. It just doesn't make any sense, because they don't know what they're talking about. And if nobody is going to give up their guns that they're trying to ban, which are not really legal, put the people that are doing the gun crimes in jail, charge them, throw the key away. You get charged with having illegal gun, or you get charged doing a gun crime, then you know what? Then you go to jail and not be let out. So don't persecute the people that are legal, abiding gun owners, hunters, ranchers, farmers, and competition shooters.
Okay. All right. Well said today, Matt. Thank you for weighing in.
Thank you.
That's Matt in Alberta. Yeah, let's take one more here before we stop. Grant in Kitchener. Grant, you're on the air.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was 4 years since they brought this idea of the gun law. So I'm right with you. It's just to shut us up and to say, you know what, we mentioned it, so we're not going to do anything. Like, it shouldn't take 4 years to make this thing pass in the House of Commons. Like, when you mentioned this, I thought of, why didn't they mention that when he was on the talk show? That, like, yeah, it baffles me.
It doesn't make a lot of sense, does it, Grant?
No, it doesn't.
Doesn't. Okay. All right. Thank you for weighing in today, Grant. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right. It is time for our break here. Hang on the line. Couple lines available now. 1-833-668-2577. This is Talk Back on News Radio. I'm David Smith, in for Rob Snow today. We'll be back right after this.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talk Back on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
It's David Smith here, in for Rob today. Thank you for joining us. Talking gun control and pharmacare, two programs that the Liberals, in my mind, will try to campaign on in the next election. And I don't think they are up to snuff. I don't think that the programs the Liberals have designed match the way they describe them, to put it mildly. Up next on the phones is Rob in Cambridge. Hi there, Rob.
Hey, howdy. With the gun control, it really will depend on what geographical area within the country. I don't think you have too much worry of it. There's probably different problems with it out in Western Canada and in the prairies, but it is really true. It's bigger issues like in, I guess, Montreal, Edmonton, or Toronto. I'd like to go further to see a gun elimination, to see that. Because wherever they're coming from, people think they're just coming across the river over the borders, but I'm certain they're probably coming through organized crime gangs or through container ships. We don't know how it is, because they're even stretched for catching people for organized crime for lifting cars and sending them over the seas. For the pharmacare, what I have never heard of anybody talking about is it covering for people on CPP disability. If you're on an Ontario disability, you get prescription Medicare taken care of by the government. But if you're on CPP disability, you have nothing. You don't get it. And yes, I get a disability amount, but it's below poverty. But when you're paying out medications for different stuff, I've asked about this stuff at the different pharmacies, and I'm 62, I'm not covered until 65. And they say, come back to us then and we'll take care of you. Well, I'm needing some diabetic medications, blood pressure medications, other medications now, not in 65. So that's a big burden. So I'd like to see whatever party work on a deal to cover people for CPP disabilities, or even people who are retiring or even working that may not have a benefit package. Even the people that are working, because you're still paying in tax, but that seems to be the bigger issue. So if they're saying they're working on it, nothing is being done. I'd like to know, they owe an explanation to all Canadians. But what is their definition of working on it? You could say you're working on concentrating on a call, but if you're reading a book and staring at another, it's hard to say you are. So, everyone can say that, but instead of promising, let's see some real action. That's what we need, no matter who's in power. Let's just see action to be taking care of us, of the people that really need it. Even the people in homelessness encampments or in addictions, whatever, get the help instead of blaming. Let's just see if we can work together to get a solution to make our problems, less and the area much better.
Okay, Rob, thank you for your thoughts today. Very thoughtful. Thank you. Yep. And that's the thing with dental care, with the dental care program, which is already real. It's actually covering dental procedures today. It's means tested and it's highly targeted. It was seniors and kids first. Seniors and kids, and then people under a certain income threshold. That makes sense. But universal single-payer pharmacare, when the vast majority of Canadians already have coverage, why? My question is why? Is that the best approach? I would argue no. Let's go to Dave in Halifax. Hi, Dave.
Hi, Dave. How are you doing today?
I'm good. What's your take?
Well, on the gun control issue, I won't get into pharmacare because I'm 68 and we'd be on the phone for an hour. On the gun control, when they announced it and they produced a list of weapons they were proposing to ban, and at the time I was a legal gun owner. I no longer have my weapons. And I looked, I had an SKS, which is a carbine, and you put a clip in it and you can fire off bullets as fast as you can pull the trigger. Now, that's a lot of firepower. And if you put in an illegal clip, then it's even worse.
Yeah.
So I figured, okay, the SKS is going to be on this list for sure. I go through the list, not a mention of it. I think they made gun selections based on aesthetics. If something looked like an AK-40, not an AK-47, what's the one that's in the news of late?
AR-15.
AR-15, thank you. So if it looked like an AR-15 or if it looked like an M16, regardless of its functionality, it went on the list. And I was left wondering, well, okay, this rifle is extremely lethal, but it's not on the list. What is the deal with that? And it just confounded me as to how they were incorporating what they wanted to ban. And I think they're totally off the mark. I don't know who made up the selection or what committee was in charge, but to my mind, it was a complete waste of time. And it left off weapons such as the one that I had, which, as I say, extremely legal. And if you're not responsible and you want to modify it, then it just gets even worse. Yet legally, I'm allowed to continue owning it. So I don't know where they're coming from. And if they make that a part of their election platform, I don't think it's going to help them one iota.
Yeah, Dave, let me lay out this scenario for you. Liberal canvasser comes to the door and they say, Pierre Poilievre's going to undo all the good work we've done on gun control. He's going to scrap what we did on gun control. My point would be, so what? What have you actually done on gun control? You know what I mean?
I'm in complete agreement with you on that. They've done absolutely nothing. It's a lot of, I think, political whitewashing. And, again, if they think they're going to be successful using this as a campaign platform, it's not going to do them any good whatsoever. And it's not going to cure the problem. Now, to be clear, I was never a hunter. All I did was shoot targets. So anything I ever killed was paper. And it got to the point where, about 4 years ago, roughly, my handgun license was up for renewal. And I thought to myself, okay, you're not going to the range anymore. They're just locked up in the safe. And so I just called the RCMP and I said, look, I've got a gun collection I want to turn in. And they came to the door, they took delivery of the weapons, and then they came back the next day and gave me a receipt that I had officially turned them into the RCMP. So, there may be people out there like me, I don't know. But certainly their list leaves much to be desired.
Okay.
And that's pretty much my point. It seems like a nonsense policy.
Yeah. Good points, Dave. Thank you. Appreciate the call.
Okay, thanks.
We have to stop for a short break. Hang on the line. Lots of time left to take all of the calls. I'm David Smith in for Rob Snow today. This is Talk Back. You're listening to News Radio.
Something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now. Hello. 1-833-668-2577.
It's Talk Back on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Yeah, David Smith here in for Rob again today, talking gun control, pharmacare. Just want to see where those are at on your list of priorities in the next election. I think they might become wedge issues. Time for another call before the top of the hour. It's Michael in Airdrie, Alberta. Hi, Michael.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine. What's your take today?
Okay, Dave. I'm just going to lay a little history on my dad. Okay, he got his .303 rifle in World War II. He served as a pilot. It was registered to him by the government and given to him. Okay, and then his career went on. He worked at a federal penitentiary. He had to register his guns through the penitentiary to the federal government. Then Harper got in, and my dad's going, I got to register my gun again? Then come the FAC, and my dad was, he didn't mention very many words and stuff like that. He just shook his head, and he said, what is the government's problem? He died in 2009, and we used that rifle for hunting and everything else, and that's 4 times that gun was registered.
4 times?
4 times.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Is that making anyone any safer, Michael, in your opinion?
No. I know farmers and everything. I shouldn't say this. I know people that have varmint guns and everything, and they're used on their farms and everything else, and they use them with respect. They know the neighbors. They know everything about hunting, about firearms and everything else. And it's this crazy society that I think is totally wacko on guns.
Okay. All right, Michael, we're just coming to the top of the hour here. Thank you for your call. I'll let you go.
Okay, take care.
Thank you. Just about a minute before we stop, so I won't bring anybody else on. Hang on the line. And if you couldn't get through earlier, we do have some lines available. 1-833-668-2577 is the number to call. I'm David Smith. This is Talk Back on News Radio. We have a whole other hour to take your calls. We can keep talking about this. I might have another topic to throw at you as well. Don't go anywhere. The top of the hour news is next, all your latest breaking news, and then I'll be back with more of your phone calls here on News Radio.
It's time to talk back
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
David Smith here, back for another hour of Talk Back on News Radio. Thank you for joining us. Phone lines available, 1-833-668-2577. Talking about some major policies that the Trudeau government may try to run on as wedge issues in the next election. One of them is gun control. How important an issue is gun control for you? For you as a voting member of the public, is gun control an important issue right now? And would you say, if it is, that the current Liberal government has done a good job on that file? I think gun control is important in and of itself, make no mistake. But I also think Canada's gun control regime is working just fine, insofar as it relates to the reasonable regulation of legal guns and law-abiding gun owners. The Liberals disagree. They think Canada's gun control laws are too lax. That's why in 2020, without drafting or passing any new legislation, using only executive authority granted to Cabinet, they declared a whole swath of previously legal guns to now be illegal in the name of public safety. Now, that was following the tragic mass shooting in Portapique, Nova Scotia. That was in 2020. It's 2024 now. How's that new gun control working out? Well, the short answer is it's not. While the Liberals claim they've made Canada safer by banning dangerous assault-style weapons, they haven't actually removed a single one of those weapons from circulation in this country. On paper, the guns are illegal, but the people who own them still own them. They're still out there. So nothing has changed in reality, in the real world. Not one gun has been bought back by the federal government 4 years after it announced the gun buyback program. So how important is it really? 1-833-668-2577. Let's go to the next caller is Wade in Sylvan Lake, Alberta. Hi, Wade.
Hey, how you doing, Dave?
I'm good. What's your take today?
Well, the gun control issue, I believe that once they start taking away everybody's guns, that's the start of the, or maybe it's in the middle of the communist regime that they're trying to establish in this country and others. For example, Mao Zedong said, all political power comes from the barrel of a gun. The Communist Party must command all the guns. That way, no guns can ever be used to command the party.
So you think this is like a slippery slope, Wade, into authoritarianism?
Absolutely. Like, look what's going on. Like example, yesterday I mentioned C-63. It's unbelievable, and the WEF wants control of the whole planet, and they want control of everything. Once they take the guns away, we have nothing left to defend ourselves with, and then they start coming after your property. They're already after our children with through social media platforms and now generative AI. They're brainwashing the children.
Okay, I got you. I got you down. Okay, we're all over the place today. I'm going to let you go. I don't agree with much of what Wade has said there. It's not a conspiracy radio show. 1-833-668-2577. Flipping back to pharmacare, I would like to talk a little bit more about pharmacare. How important is the federal pharmacare program to you? Because I think that's going to be a primary wedge issue, not even just for the Liberals, but also for the NDP in the next election. I think if you sat down most regular Canadians and asked them, Do you think the government should cover diabetes drugs for people who don't have insurance? I think most reasonable people would tell you yes. Heck, I say yes. Yes, there should be public insurance for people who need diabetes medication, who have need, who don't have their own coverage. And in fact, something that a lot of you may not know is that there are public insurance programs, multiple different programs at the provincial level in Canada targeting those people. There are gaps in those programs, make no mistake. There are gaps in them. But what the federal government wants to do is set up its own program to stand over all those other programs. Universal, single-payer pharmacare for everyone, even if they don't need it. I'm not exaggerating that. It's right there in the legislation. Universal, single-payer, first dollar coverage. And the federal health minister also wants the Senate to add that this would be publicly administered. So no partnering with existing insurance companies to administer it. Totally separate. Duplicate, you could say. The Senate committee studying that bill, it's studying it today as we do this show. The NDP wants it passed by the end of the year, before even an early election could be called. But other groups are raising concerns about what rushing into pharmacare could do to Canadians who already have drug coverage. So if you already have drug coverage, listen up. There's this group, the Smart Health Benefits Coalition. It represents 65,000 Canadian employers who offer drug benefit plans, including 4,500 union drug plans. They're raising the alarm this week about the National Pharmacare Plan. They say not only is it going to interfere with people's existing drug coverage, it's also going to cost a lot more than we previously thought. How about that? The Parliamentary Budget Officer studied pharmacare back in May and found it would cost $1.9 billion over 5 years to get the thing up and running. But this Smart Health Benefits Coalition points out this week that those estimates were based on the assumption that the federal government would partner with some private insurance companies to administer the program. But they're not going to do that after all. Literally on Monday of this week, the federal health minister sent a letter urging the Senate to amend the pharmacare law so the new federal program cannot work with existing insurance plans. Has to be totally separate, publicly administered. So if you factor that in, and the parliamentary budget officer did, if you factor it in, the cost of the program would increase by $2.5 billion. Instead of $1.9 billion over 5 years, it's going to cost $4.5 billion over 5 years. The Smart Health Benefits Coalition says it is, quote, advocating for targeted coverage to support uninsured and underinsured Canadians while keeping existing benefit plans. It does not make sense to the federal government to pay billions in new money to cover the cost of drugs for people who already have comprehensive coverage, end quote. I mean, that makes sense to me. Doesn't that make sense to you? So now that we know all of that, is this specific pharmacare program really what the Liberals and NDP make it out to be? It doesn't sound like it to me. What about you? 1-833-668-2577. Where is this pharmacare program on your list of priorities for the federal government right now, for the next election? Do we need universal single-payer pharmacare in this country? 1-833-668-2577. Lines available now. I'm David Smith. We'll take a short break. This is Talk Back. You're listening to News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talk Back on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Yes, it is. It's David Smith here in for Rob Snow again today. Phone lines available at 1-833-668-2577. I've been asking you how important these two big government policies are. And just in terms of your list of important things to focus on for the next election, gun control and pharmacare. I've had lots of calls on those two issues. in the last hour and so far this hour. We can keep talking about that. But I'm going to throw out another topic here as well, a little bit on the lighter side, because I know it's been a heavy-duty week of politics, a lot of politics this week. I am like Rob Snow. I could talk about politics all hour long, but I want to throw out another lighter topic, because this one's interesting as well. We haven't talked about it in quite some time on this show, and that is working from home. Oh, yes. Working from home, remote work. It's back in the news, people. Yes, it's back in the news. If you thought you had heard the last of this saga from the government workers here in the nation's capital, you were mistaken. I'm sorry to say. As you may know, the federal government workers are now required to go into the office 3 days a week. The horror, the abuse. That has been settled. The union tried to fight it. They lost. Despite all of their whining and tantrums, they lost. And the civil servants who work for you must now get into cars and onto buses and head into their place of employment 3 whole days a week. That's been settled. But now, according to the local newspaper here in Ottawa, the federal government's not ruling out requiring public servants to be back at the office for 4 days a week. They made them go back 3. They might increase that to 4. Almost 1 month into the government's updated remote work mandate, which forced many public servants to be in office for at least 3 days a week, Christine Fox, the deputy clerk of the Privy Council, says the government is committed to hybrid work, but did not take the possibility of an increase to workers' required office presence off the table. I will pause here for the screams of horror and outrage. Tough year for the civil servants. My heart goes out to them. It really does. But since it's back in the news today, I thought I would bring it up with you here on the show. Not about the government workers specifically. I think we've beaten that horse enough. But just on the whole remote work thing in general. Is remote work better than being in the office? Is it better than being in the office? Is it worth fighting over if you have an office-type job? Or even if you don't? What are your thoughts on that? 1-833-668-2577. Is it worth fighting over? Is remote work better than being in the office? Obviously, the benefits of working from home all day, every day are obvious. Don't have to commute. Don't have to dress appropriately. You're at home. You're in your comfortable surroundings. But I wonder if people have been working remotely for the last number of years. I wonder if some of the shine has gone out of it. I wonder if people are quietly missing the office. I know that I personally don't function well doing the work from home thing. I need to physically get up and change my environment to be productive. I get too distracted at home. I'm not motivated. I miss the energy that comes from being in a room with other people who are also working. We do the Teams thing here at News Radio, our parent company, Rogers. It's a Microsoft Teams company. I hate Teams. I really do. The video calls, the group chats, the notifications. I don't even like emailing. I like calling people on the phone, or even better, walking down to their office and sticking my head in their door. I love a good hallway meeting. Running into someone in the hall, chopping it up about work-related things. It just gets the juices going. You know what I mean? The productive mood is supported by that environment. Just my own theory. I'm not a social psychologist. These are just my own impressions. I think it's probably good for people to be in the office at least a majority of the time, 3 or 4 days. I think it's probably good for you to go into your place of employment and not exist as an external entity connected to your work through only a screen. Agree? Disagree? Is remote work really good for people? What do you think? Would love to hear some thoughts on that topic too. At 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. Lines available. Give me a call. Let's talk about it. I'm here for the whole hour. I can talk. Or you can call and you can talk. That's why we call it Talk Back. This is News Radio. We'll stop here for a short break. 1-833-668-2577. I'm David Smith, in for Rob Snow today.
something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talk Back on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
David Smith here in for Rob today. It's Talk Back on News Radio, 1-833-668-2577. Phone lines available. We have a caller on the line. Wants to talk about remote work. Trevor in Calgary. Hi, Trevor.
Hi, David. How are you?
I'm good. The reason I throw out this remote work topic is because the union here in Ottawa for these government workers is still fighting tooth and nail against going back to work. But I'm just curious if you think working remotely is really best for people. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a great topic. I think it really depends on the job. Obviously, a lot has to be performed by people on site. For myself, I find remote work ideal. When I go into the office, I find there's more of a level of distraction and less work gets done than when I'm working remotely and can just plug in and get my work done at home. And the advantages, like you mentioned, are pretty clear. No commute, don't have to pay for lunch every day. I can be with my family right after I leave my desk and wrap up my day. And if you set up your environment right, the distractions can be minimized, which I totally understand. There can be distractions. It's easy to say, oh, I just want to walk away and go do something instead of work. But if you stay focused, I think it's pretty neat. I like it.
But the first thing you said, Trevor, was it really depends on the kind of work. Do you think that the benefits you experience are more to do with what you actually do and less so to do with the fact that you get to do it remotely, if you know what I mean?
Sort of. A lot of the work I do, because I speak to clients across North America. So working remotely, I have to use Teams, just like you mentioned. And so for that, it's ideal. I think the type of work really does have a factor in it as well.
One more question for you, because I've also read this, that remote work can be, it can do a disservice to younger people. And I have heard before that people who are in the later stage of a career enjoy the remote work more because, as you say, there can be fewer distractions. But if you're younger in a career, you could really benefit from interacting with your more experienced peers. Do you think that there's something to that?
I do. And again, it depends on the role. I think a software developer would want to be working from home, undistracted, just doing their thing. But again, depending on the role, there could be a lot of benefit for younger workers new to the workforce to, garnish that experience from more experienced coworkers. So yeah, it's definitely a plus.
Okay. All right. Trevor, thank you for calling in and weighing in on that. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being on.
Thank you. That's Trevor in Calgary. Yeah, remote work. It's back in the news. And it's not necessarily the government workers part of it that I find interesting. It's the fact that a lot of people have been doing it for, almost 5 years now. I just wonder if you're out there, if you do the remote or the hybrid work thing, has some of the shine gone off of it? The longer you do it, do you find yourself missing the way that it used to be? For me, as I've said, I'm an open book with you guys. I can't do it. I can't do it from home. I need to be in a place with other people who are workers, who are working and being productive. Maybe that's a character flaw. Maybe I should think about that and work on myself. All right, we're coming up to the bottom of the hour here. Whole half hour left to take the calls. Brian in Calgary, I see you there. Hang on the line for me. I'll get to you right after the news. We can go back talking about political wedge issues. 1-833-668-2577. Give me a call. Get on the air and have your say. That's why we call it Talk Back. We dedicate this time for you. I want to hear from you. I'm David Smith. In for Rob Snow today. This is News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
David Smith in with you again today. Thank you for joining us here on News Radio. Been talking about political wedge issues on the show today and also on remote work, the pluses and minuses, the pros and cons of not being at the office. On the political side, up next we have Brian in Calgary. Hello, Brian.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. These issues may be important. I think one issue that needs to be talked about is national defense.
Oh yeah,
given everything that's going on in the world right now, we've been living on the Americans' coattails for years, and at some point in time, I mean, we've got to be able to beef up our armed forces so that we actually have some, shall I say, reputation, or some say in what's going on around us.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Brian. It's a national security and foreign policies is chronically underappreciated, I think, in Canadian politics. It's just kind of the way it is. But, to go back earlier, I was talking about the gun buyback program, for example. If there was room in the budget, Brian, if there was $10 billion in the budget, would you rather see it going to buying back these random list of guns that they've now made illegal from Canadian citizens, or would you like to see them better equipping our armed forces abroad?
I would way much like to see them equip our armed forces. $10 billion could do quite a bit, eh? We probably should be, I think we spend around $25 billion right now for our armed forces. And we probably should be spending about $40 to $45 billion a year to meet our 2% target. And that's really the least we can do. People think that Russia's far away. It's only on the other side of the Arctic Ocean from us. They can easily walk in that way. Yeah. And I think people need to wake up and take a look at the map and realize we're not that far away from the next war.
So on your list of important issues for the next election, Brian, you would put that above pharmacare or gun control?
Absolutely. Now, I do want to say one thing about pharmacare.
Sure.
And I'm conservative in bent, okay? But I will say this, that if it were to be done properly, there should be a savings on how many people end up in the emerge ward who, if they're getting their proper medications and that, they don't end up in the emerge ward. There should be a saw-off in terms of cost.
Right.
But the problem is government being the way it's operated. We have, they're talking about buying stuff in bulk. Well, hell, they can't even buy a couple of 2x4s to build a barracks on an armed forces base, and now they're talking about buying drugs.
Right. Yeah.
For that reason, if I thought that they could actually manage something like that, I'd be for it. But I'm not confident that the government could manage that.
Right. To be honest with you, Brian, I'm not either, and it's kind of a sad state of affairs. All right, thank you for your call today, Brian. I appreciate that.
You bet.
Thank you. I want to go to Jason on the pros and cons of remote work in Kitchener, Ontario. Jason, hello.
How you doing today?
I'm good. What are your thoughts on that?
Honestly, so I'm a worker who has to be at work every day. I work in healthcare. I work, frontline with residents on a daily basis, and so that opportunity is not given to me. I actually enjoy going to work. I enjoy having lunch with my coworkers or sitting in the break room and just chit-chatting and shooting the breeze. And you know what? If employers want to allow that, I have no problem with that at all. What I take issue with, though, is when unions, and I will preface this by saying I'm a union guy. I worked for my union. I was a chair. I negotiated. I bargained. But what I take issue with is the unions saying to the employer, nope, they're not coming in for more than 2 days a week or 3 days a week. Or me as an employee saying, I'm not coming in more than 5 days a week. Prior to COVID, that was the norm. And to me, what your employer says you should be doing, as long as it's not breaking the law, as long as it's not infringing on your, whether human rights or your collective bargaining rights, you got to get your arse back into the office. If that's what your employer says, you have no choice. You don't get to fight about it. You don't get to whine about it. You get your arse back into the office because that's what they want. And so that's what, my wife works from home remotely, and we quite disagree on that, but I'm of the point of no. If they say get into work, you get into work.
And especially for me, Jason, I'm curious if you would agree with me on this or not. If it's a job that when you were hired, the job was in office 5 days a week, and then that changed. Well, you agreed to do a job that was 5 days a week in the office. And if your employer says that's a condition of your employment, I think that you should have to do it.
100%. And there are, I think employers are being more lenient than they ever were after the pandemic. And again, I'm fine with that. If when you get hired, employer says, well, you know what, you can work home 2 days, you can be in the office 3 days. I have zero problem with that. But this mentality that a lot of workers have, and I don't want to say it's the millennials, but there's a certain age demographic who are kind of, biting the hands that feed them. They're of this, well, no, this is all I'm going to do, and if you don't like it, well, then you know what? If I don't like it, then I'm going to find somebody who actually wants to do the job 5 days a week. Another employer of mine, I have a part-time job working for a city, and we talk about trying to find lifeguards or camp counselors in the summer, and specifically lifeguards. Back in the day when I was a teenager, many, many years ago, you wanted a full-time, especially in the summer, you wanted a full-time, 5 days a week paying job for those 2 months. Now it's like, well, I only want to work 2 days, and I don't want to pick up any more shifts than I have to. Like, what happened to the work ethic that a lot of us had ingrained in us growing up? For whatever reason, it seemed to kind of it's washed out the window just as much as the pandemic has. So, if your employer says get to work, you get to work. I'm sorry, you don't get to fight it in the courts because you're wasting taxpayer money at that point in time as well. Now,
that's life, right? Nobody said life was fair. If the boss says go to work, you got to go to work.
Exactly. You know what? Everybody likes to just. If I had my way, I'd be doing my programming from my home, but that's not the reality because I'm expected to be in the office from 8 until 4, Monday to Friday, every other Saturday, what have you. But that's the expectations. That's what I was hired for 24 years ago, and it has not changed. And so until that time changes, I will continue to go into work. And so should everybody else if your employer says you have to come into work.
Okay. Jason, thank you for your thoughts today. Great call.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's Jason in Kitchener. I am David Smith running into the break here. Lines available again, 1-833-668-2577 is the number to call. This is Talkback. Still time to take some calls if you want to get on the air and have your say. I'd love to hear from you. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
David Smith here in for Rob Snow today. Thank you for listening. I have about 15 minutes left until the top of the hour to take some calls. Every line available at 1-833-668-2577. Lots of interesting perspectives today on political wedge issues, priorities for the next election, and also on remote work. I was doing some reading on the remote work thing this morning before the show, because as I've said, I have this hunch that I don't think fully remote work is actually all that good for the workers. I think there are hidden downsides to it, and I wonder if remote workers might be starting to experience that. Some of the shine has gone off of their remote gig. So I was looking for some evidence to back up my theory that remote work might be bad for people, and I actually did find that my hunch was not without evidence. You never hear the government worker unions talking about this side of the equation. So this is from a magazine article published last year from Fortune.com. If you've been working remotely for some time now, you may have already noticed the physical impact on your body, according to Chris Hines, a Washington, D.C.-based workplace wellness and ergonomics educator. The recent shift to remote work has aged our bodies by, get this, 10 to 15 years. 10 to 15 years. Quite abruptly, people were making workspaces at home that perpetuated postural strain and mechanical stress. Work was happening at the kitchen table, on the couch, in the bed, and from a desk space without ergonomic support specific to the individual. That's definitely true for me. If I'm working at home, which I do in the mornings before coming to the studio, I'm just working away at my dining room table on my laptop, reading the news, checking the emails, and my laptop is below eye level, and I find if I sit there for an hour or more, it starts to hurt my neck. Here in the studio where I'm talking to you right now, we have fancy ergonomic chairs. We've got the standing desks even. All the computer screens are at eye level. It's really much more comfortable physically. So that's the physical side of the equation. What do you think? Pros, cons of remote work. Caller on the line. It's Luke from Calgary. Hey, Luke. We have Luke on the line. Hey.
I figured I'd call in. You said you had a bunch of lines available. I don't work from home, but I build houses, and with the workforce the way it was, I've spent extended periods of time just building the house by myself. I think it is. Yeah. I did like about 8 months without a worker, and yeah, I can definitely say like you definitely miss that human connection. Right? You're just by yourself with your own thoughts, just doing a task all day long, day in and day out, right? It definitely, I would definitely say it takes a toll on the individual, right?
And in your case, Luke, I mean, you're doing something active. You're physically constructing something. Imagine if you were just in a dark room looking at a screen, right?
Oh, absolutely. Especially with even like healthcare workers, what are the people that read the ultrasounds and x-rays and stuff? A lot of time you see them. They're just there by themselves all day.
But at least they're in a workplace where you can go and out into the hallway, you can get a cup of coffee, stretch your legs, talk to some other people.
Yeah, like I really don't think it's a good idea. I think you kind of, like I know that you definitely just become detached from people, right? Because there's obviously no one around, and it is a little bit, I'll definitely say it is a little bit weird. And then when I eventually had some guys come back, it's weird having people around you, right? And then you get used to it. And then even then I went to another couple job sites where there was, 20 or 30 or 40 guys on site, and it's a totally different feel to your work day. And you definitely, I could say that I felt just generally happier. Even there's guys that you don't like there, but it doesn't matter, right? You're just happier because you're around people. I think we're just supposed to be around people.
Yeah, we're social animals. Yeah. I agree with you, Luke. Thank you for weighing in today. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Take care. That's Luke in Calgary. I just wonder, I mean, we only have so much data to work with, but, in 20 years from now, are they going to have all these studies looking backwards saying, it was a terrible idea to send everyone home to work by themselves from their homes? We have enough of an issue in our society today with isolation, with mental health, with overexposure to social media and digital media. I just wonder if you're really fighting for a remote work position, you may not know what you're giving up. I've already said the experts say physically it's not the best thing to do. What about psychologically? In a 2020 Microsoft study, researchers found that remote collaboration is more mentally challenging than in-person collaboration, but not necessarily in a good way. The study found that brainwave patterns associated with stress and overwork were much higher when collaborating remotely than in person. Part of the reason is that the amount of visual attention we need to give in a virtual setting is higher than in an in-person meeting because our brains have to work harder. It's neuroscience. In everyday situation, our brains rely on unexpected inputs, body language, items in our peripheral vision, to gather information about situations and people. So when the scope of input is limited to a small rectangle displaying just people's faces, those inputs are eliminated because our brains go into overdrive. Doesn't that make a lot of eminent sense to you? Think about all the time you spend in a day already, even if you're not a remote worker, staring at a small rectangle of light and information. It's probably too much time, regardless of what your work environment is. If your job requires a lengthy group meeting, maybe every day, doing it virtually is apparently worse for your brain than dragging yourself into a conference room in person. Again, I get that 5 days a week may not be necessary. It really depends on the nature of your work, but I do wonder if the people fighting tooth and nail to keep getting paid to lie horizontal in bed all day really realize the downside of the convenience that they're enjoying. Just a bit of a lighter topic. We'll stop here for our final break. Some closing remarks on the other side. I'm David Smith here on The Talk Back on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talk Back on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
David Smith here, winding down the talk back for today. Don't have time to take any more calls, but thank you for all of those calls all day long. Great discussion on the show today. I just need a final word on gun control, because mark my words, gun control will be a wedge issue in the next election. I think the key question you have to ask yourself is, will more gun control do any good? Just some stats to leave with you today. StatsCan police reported crime statistics for 2022 say there were just over 9,000 victims of gun-related crime. And that number has gone up. 10% higher in 2021, 60% higher than 2013. A 100% increase from 10 years prior. And all that is post-2020 Trudeau government gun control measures. According to the U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, 1/3 of Canadian guns used in crime were illegally exported from the U.S. between 2017 and 2021. In just Toronto, according to a Global News investigation looking at data from 2018 to 2021, 85% of all handguns traced by police back to gun crime came from the United States. They did not originate in this country. I think that's compelling evidence that our gun control laws are pretty strong. And they are working as intended when it comes to reasonable control of legal guns and law-abiding gun owners. If there's a problem with gun violence in this country, which there is, it's not because legal guns are being misused. Because they're coming in from the United States. Thank you for all of those calls today. Really appreciate it. Great discussion on the Talk Back on News Radio. Your local news, latest breaking news is coming up next. I'm David Smith. Thank you for listening.